I'm Nima Rajan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will not send any diplomats to the Beijing Olympics. He says the country is extremely concerned about China's human rights abuses and has been discussing the matter with allies. The United States was first to announce a diplomatic boycott on Monday, meaning American athletes would still compete in Beijing, but no U.S. political officials would attend. Australia and the United Kingdom have both now followed suit. China denies those allegations and is accusing the United States of upending political neutrality of sport. The Bank of Canada is keeping its key interest rate at 0.25%, and it doesn't expect to raise it until sometime between April and September of next year. That's in line with its previous guidance. However, the central bank is warning that high inflation rates will persist, and it won't be until the second half of 2022 that inflation falls back toward its comfort zone of between 1% and 3%. It's keeping a close eye on expectations for price and wage growth to make sure they don't create a spiral of price increases. Well, with health officials urging people to get a third dose, Pfizer has released a new study. It's on whether booster shots of its COVID-19 vaccine may make an important difference. The company says a booster dose may offer important protection against the new Omicron variant, even though the initial 2 doses appear significantly less effective. Omicron carries an unusually large number of mutations, and scientists are racing to learn how easily it spreads, whether it causes more severe illness, and how much it might evade the protection of prior vaccinations. America's newest ambassador to Canada says priority 1 in his new job will be to preserve and strengthen the special relationship between both countries. David Cohen presented his letters of credence on Tuesday to Governor General Mary Simon at Rideau Hall. The lawyer, lobbyist, and former U.S. tech executive is the first to take the ambassador role full-time since 2019. Observers say Mr. Cohen will be busy. Several irritants are complicating U.S.-Canada ties. This includes a proposed tax credit for electric vehicles that threatens the health of the Canadian auto sector. 4 new criminal code offenses are contained in an upcoming federal ban on conversion therapy. Bill C-4 passed in the Senate on Tuesday. After being granted royal assent, it will outlaw conversion therapy for consenting adults, as well as for children and non-consenting adults. The offenses include causing a person to undergo conversion therapy, subjecting a minor to conversion therapy abroad, and profiting from the provision of conversion therapy, as well as advertising or promoting the practice. Convictions could mean 2 to 5 years in prison. Northern Ontario's Constance Lake First Nation is confirming 12 cases of blastomycosis, which is a lung infection usually caused by fungus. Chief Ramona Sutherland says 119 people have symptoms of the infection, which include cough, fever, chills, fatigue, and difficulty breathing. The lung infection has killed 2 people. The Business Development Bank of Canada's annual survey of business owners finds there is strong confidence in the economy. The Canadian Entrepreneur's 2022 investment outlook says 84% of businesses plan to maintain investments or invest more in their businesses over the next 12 months. The report suggests labor shortages are expected to emerge as the greatest impediment to investments in 2022, once demand and cash flow return to normal. A survey suggests women working for small and medium-sized Canadian businesses got an average raise of 5.3% this year. However, their male co-workers got pay hikes averaging 10.3%. Toronto-based HR software company Hummy surveyed more than 4,000 small and medium-sized businesses. It says the gender pay gap may be fueled by corporate power structures, the style in which people negotiate, and the lack of women in executive and other leadership roles. Suncor Energy is looking at Vancouver, Edmonton, Montreal, Sarnia, Ontario, and Denver as possible sites for the sustainable jet fuel plant it plans to build by 2025. The Calgary-based company is a founding partner in tech startup LanzaJet, which makes jet fuel out of ethanol from products like corn and sugarcane. The aviation industry is keen to develop sustainable fuel sources to lower its greenhouse gas emissions. But the industry is nowhere close to large-scale production just yet. Government officials, business leaders, and activists from Canada and more than 100 other countries are gathering for a 2-day virtual summit for democracy hosted by the U.S. The goal of the meeting is to slow the march of authoritarianism, but few people in Washington or Ottawa expect it will accomplish much or even get any significant public attention. All right, we'll be right back after the break with a look at how disasters can impact mental health. We'll have our interview segment up next. BC residents who've been affected by the province's devastating floods are being encouraged to take care of their mental health. Caroline MacDonald Harker, an expert in the psychological and social impacts of disasters on families, says her studies of extensive flooding in southern Alberta and the wildfire that devastated Fort McMurray found lasting effects. She says those included anxiety, depression, or even post-traumatic stress disorder, adding the signs that someone may be having trouble coping after disaster can include changes in appetite or sleeping patterns. To tell us more about how natural disasters can impact the mental health of those affected is Dr. Caroline MacDonald Harker herself, professor in the sociology department at Mount Royal University. Dr. MacDonald Harker, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, what do we know so far about how disasters may impact people in the long run?
What we know and what my research findings have shown is that major disasters have not only devastating impacts on physical infrastructure like homes, buildings, and wider communities, but they also have long-term mental health impacts on individuals who are both directly and indirectly impacted by disasters. And in fact, the mental health effects following disaster are so profound that they last much longer than the visible destruction caused by disaster, with some people still suffering effects even 10 years later.
Now, that's very interesting, Doctor. So we mentioned you studied the impacts of flooding and wildfires in Alberta. What did you find?
Certainly. What I found from my research is that it can take several years before people who experience a disaster even notice the mental toll it has taken on them. Oftentimes, people don't deal with some of the mental health challenges that they are experiencing. They keep putting it off, thinking that if they focus on rebuilding and getting their home back in order, then the mental health challenges will go away. But often they don't. And unfortunately, at that point, their mental health challenges have become exacerbated. And so my research has also found that strong communication, support systems, and a positive outlook were better able to help individuals cope and move forward after experiencing a disaster.
So taking all of this into consideration, how do you think the BC flooding is likely to impact the mental health of people in the region?
Based on my research on the 2013 Alberta flood and the 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire, it's highly likely that individuals will experience either short-term or long-term mental health challenges. Disasters are stressful. They are traumatic experiences, and there are specific populations that are more vulnerable to the effects of disasters, including women, children and youth, immigrant populations. And so it's crucial that mental health supports, resources, services, and other supports are accessible to individuals, not only during disasters, but also in the post-disaster context.
All right, doctor. So how can someone identify if they or a loved one has been mentally affected by a disaster?
It's really important to notice if one's behavior has changed. So, are people sleeping more or less? Are they eating more or less? Are they more irritable? Are they utilizing substances as a way to cope? So certainly important to pay attention to how you're reacting. And of course, experiencing stress is very normal in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. But if it ends up being prolonged, then that's when individuals really need to pay attention and reach out for some of those formalized supports. And I know that that's easier said than done. A lot of people are reluctant to access formalized supports. And so my recommendation is always that they reach out to their own immediate network, that they are open and honest with people in their environment, and they talk with them about the challenges that they are facing.
And we know BC is now implementing recovery efforts following this flooding. So is there anything that government officials can do to tackle this issue?
Absolutely. It's essential that governments, whether that be at the federal, provincial, or municipal level, become better prepared for disasters. we know that disasters are occurring at increased frequency and they're likely to continue to occur. Therefore, it is crucial that government bodies engage in disaster mitigation efforts, that they develop disaster relief programs, and that they help residents better understand disaster risk and preparedness so that individuals are better prepared the next time they face a disaster.
30 seconds left here, Doctor, but what are you keeping your eyes out for as BC is recovering from all of this?
Absolutely. Certainly, there is a lot of emphasis on the physical rebuilding. However, it's important that mental health supports are provided to individuals at the same time concurrently, as opposed to waiting months or years later, because individuals do need those immediate supports.
All right, Dr. McDonald-Harker, thank you so much for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back after the break with a look at stories making news from around the world. But first, we take a look at the markets with Catherine Murray, the host of The Buck Stops Here. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Up next, we have Forum Daily's weekly market update with Catherine Murray. She is the host of The Buck Stops Here, which takes a look at what is happening in the markets. All yours, Catherine.
Thank you, Nima. Hello and welcome to your weekly market recap. I'm Catherine Murray. U.S. and Canadian markets are relatively unchanged following a big rally yesterday, where the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq saw their biggest rally since last March. The TSX was also up stronger to the tune of 1.5%. Stepping back, part of the reason for the rally is apparently because U.S. hedge funds have finished deleveraging their portfolios, meaning the natural selling pressure in the market has abated. Just to illustrate this point, because it is important, investment banks actually saw the largest 10-day net selling since April. The market was also selling off because investors have been concerned that the U.S. Federal Reserve will taper their bond buying program too quickly. It seems as though that hawkish concern is less of a concern over the past 24 hours. Also, of course, investors believe that the U.S. Federal Reserve will continue to be accommodative in their monetary policy. In other words, just keep the stimulus flowing and going. And that, of course, has been, as we've seen since the financial crisis, very accommodative to the equity markets. As you can see, a lot of back and forth in terms of this narrative, in terms of Fed expectations, leading many strategists to believe that we will see continued volatility and increased volatility and some swings in the market. Now, another reason for the market bounce back is more positive corporate commentary. This is always positive as it relates to market sentiment and market drivers. From American Express, we had some positive comments this week. And also consumer-oriented company Dave & Buster's. That ticker is PLAY, play, and that stock is up by over 8% today. They did beat third quarter earnings expectations, and more importantly, their walk-in sales were strong, and the company management is also saying that the recovery has continued quarter to date. So again, real-time positive commentary. We also saw Southwest Airlines raise their fourth quarter guidance. Now, another market driver that is helping to support markets is news that 3 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine neutralizes the COVID variant Omicron. Add to that, of course, we are seeing more and more companies increase their share buyback programs. So in other words, they're big believers in their shares and their opportunity set that they have in front of them. That's also always a positive driver to the market sentiment. And also FOMO, the fear of missing out. It has not stopped. So investors also buying into that trade and the fear of missing out. So that's supportive. In Canada, we have heard that the BOC, the Bank of Canada, will not change their overnight rate. That was the expectation, so in line with expectations. They did comment in their statement that they are seeing some strong recent economic indicators, but that they will remain accommodative until the slack is in fact absorbed. They do expect inflation to remain elevated in the first half of 2022, but then ease back down to 2%. Interestingly, though, the Canadian dollar did decline on the news. I guess the market was a little bit more hawkish. The market prior to today's news was actually seeing a 50% chance that we will see a rate hike in January. Now it appears that the rate hike will be April of 2022. Just a few really interesting stocks to watch that I wanted to mention. Keep your eye on Dollarama. They had some interesting and good earnings results. Also Apple. This is now hitting the $3 trillion mark. And this stock, Apple, was rising even even when the market has been selling off over the past week or so, it absolutely appears to be a core holding for so many investors. So continue to watch Apple stock. Also, of course, we're hearing that iPhone demand is strong. Take a look at Bitcoin as well. It certainly has been as weak as of late. When we saw the market sell off, we saw Bitcoin sell off even more so. But right now seems to be holding that $50,000 mark. We're also seeing a nice rebound in WTI, the price of crude oil. That has rebounded again after seeing some selling pressure over the past week. Gold relatively unchanged, but keep your eyes on it. We will get the U.S. inflation data or CPI out this Friday. That's going to dictate probably some market swings and also where the U.S. dollar goes, Canadian dollar, and gold. That does it for me. Nima, back to you.
Lots of activity to keep our eyes open for, Catherine. Thanks for that. For more analysis and news on the markets, tune into Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. All right, well, meanwhile, a new survey of more than 1,000 businesses found that Canadian companies hit by ransomware attacks shell out almost $500,000 on average to perpetrators. The survey was conducted by Angus Reid for cybersecurity company Palo Alto Networks. It says the average ransom paid by Canadian companies was over $458,000. The survey found that 55% of respondents said their companies had been the victim of a recent ransomware attack. And we'll be back with news from around the world after the break. India's chief of defense staff dies after a helicopter accident. Germany gets a new chancellor, and a U.S. cybersecurity company uncovers evidence of Chinese hackers, while Facebook announces a ban on all companies linked to Myanmar's military. These stories and more coming up next. India's chief of defense staff, his wife, and 11 other people are dead after a helicopter crash in southern Tamil Nadu state. One officer survived and is being treated in a military hospital. General Bipin Rawat was the most senior official in the Indian military and the country's first chief of defense staff, a position created by the government in 2019. The German parliament voted to make center-left leader Olaf Scholz the country's 9th post-Second World War chancellor. His government takes office with high hopes of modernizing Germany and combating climate change. But first, it must tackle the challenge of handling Germany's toughest phase of the pandemic so far. Facebook's parent company Meta has announced a new ban on postings linked to Myanmar's military to include all pages, groups, and accounts representing military-controlled businesses. It had already banned advertising from such businesses in February. This was after the military coup in Myanmar. The new ban comes just a day after a high-profile lawsuit was filed in California. It was against Facebook parent Meta Platforms, seeking over $150 billion. This was over the company's alleged failure to stop hateful posts inciting violence against the Muslim Rohingya minority by Myanmar's military and its supporters. A U.S.-based private cybersecurity company says it has uncovered evidence around Chinese hackers who are likely state-sponsored. The company says the hackers have been broadly targeting government and private sector organizations across Southeast Asia. These include those closely involved with Beijing on infrastructure development projects. Specific targets included government and military targets in Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia. This is according to the report by the INSICT Group, the threat research division of U.S.-based Recorded Future. It says the hacks made use of custom tools that are not publicly available and are used by multiple groups believed to be Chinese state-sponsored. The European Union wants to set up a system of trade sanctions that it could impose on any foreign power it accuses of trying to coerce the bloc for economic or political gain. The EU's executive branch, the European Commission, wants to be able to react without needing the endorsement of all member nations in cases of coercion. It says such a plan could be used in situations like China's diplomatic and trade spat with Lithuania over Taiwan. The plan was unveiled on Wednesday and would give Brussels the power to impose punitive tariffs, quotas, or even limit access to EU markets. Austria's new chancellor says the country's fourth national lockdown will end on Sunday, but lockdown restrictions will remain in place for non-vaccinated residents. Chancellor Karl Nehammer said Wednesday the end of the lockdown will be an opening with a seat belt, meaning some measures will stay in place also for people who are vaccinated. Especially affected regions can implement stricter measures independently. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has ordered an inquiry into a leaked video. It showed senior members of his staff joking about holding a Christmas party last December that breached lockdown regulations. Mr. Johnson apologized in Parliament, telling MPs that he was furious when he saw the video. It showed his then press secretary, Allegra Stratton, appearing to joke about an illicit party at his Downing Street office. The Prime Minister's office has spent days trying to refute reports that Mr. Johnson's staff held the party at a time when restrictions prohibited most indoor gatherings. Both houses of Chile's Congress have voted to approve a marriage equality bill that also includes authorization for adoptions by same-sex couples. The initiative was approved on Tuesday, first by the Senate and shortly afterward by the Chamber of Deputies. The measure now goes to President Sebastián Pinera, who supported the bill. Thailand's Supreme Court has upheld a more than 3-year prison sentence for a construction tycoon. He is convicted of shooting a black panther in a wildlife sanctuary and cooking it over a campfire. Premchai Karnasuta's imprisonment is a rare case of a rich, influential Thai citizen having to serve time. The February 2018 incident in a UNESCO World Heritage Site caused widespread outrage. An advocacy group in Halifax that builds small shelters for the homeless has put out a children's book as a fundraiser and education tool. Halifax Mutual Aid hopes to encourage family conversations on the housing crisis using the book, along with a gingerbread house kit. The group is asking for $15 per package. The money raised will be used to build emergency crisis shelters for those without housing. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. All right, take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on the Forum Daily News.